Now, there is going to be another labor union that rises that has a bit of a different way of looking at this. They're not looking for just sheer numbers. The American Federation of Labor, or the AFL, they want skilled laborers. People who have a very specific kind of work, that they have a very specific technique, that they are craftsmen. Now we got to go back and play this game. Are there a lot of skilled workers? No. So why do they want the skilled workers then? What do they offer?
Well, because their skills are, well, not a lot of people have them, so they're hard to come by.
Certainly. They're hard to come by, which means you have something to negotiate for. Your labor is fantastically valuable. So they're going to focus on what's called collective bargaining. What this means is simply you go to the industrialists and tell them, you need us, but we need you as well. We need a deal. They would go and negotiate for set wages, for hours, for specifically safe working conditions. And say, if you don't meet our demands, we have a little bit of power. If you don't meet our demands, what could these workers always do? They can go on strike. They can simply refuse to work. Now, if you're the Carnegies, if you're the Rockefellers, and you have just these average people saying to you, we're not going to work. Make your product without us. Does that make you particularly happy? Do you think the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, are really ever told what to do by anyone? So, what do? What happens if they have a whole factory say, we refuse to go to work, we're going on strike? If you're the Carnegie, if you're the Rockefeller, what do? How do you fix the problem? You hire strike breakers.
Oh, yeah.
People who are large individuals who have baseball bats, chains, brass knuckles, and say, look, you're either going to work right now, or you're going to work after a beating. What's it going to be? Hopefully you find a third option. This happens countless times. Carnegie, Rockefeller, they hire the strike breakers, they beat up their own workers, and what do you know? The strike ends. How convenient. Now this goes on literally for years. We have this weird kind of situation where workers are starting to take at least a little bit of power, but it's just taken right back. Things are going to start to boil over. We're going to see a scenario take place where finally a decision has to be made. Do we keep beating up our own workers, or do we find a more civil way of fixing the problem? The Vanderbilts, Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, they didn't get to their position of power by being dumb. These men look at their situation and say, if only there was a law against something that hurts business. If only we could find something that is slowing down interstate commerce. These labor unions going on strike is a monopoly. I see some very confused faces. If you have one of these labor unions and every single person in your factory belongs to it, do they have a monopoly on labor? You simply have to go to court and say, what's a monopoly?
Now you know what a monopoly is.
What do you know? Oh, the grand irony. Here comes Rockefeller saying, look, I can't make my product, I can't ship it because this monopoly is stopping it from happening. You're exactly right. They are a monopoly. I'm not, though. So they take the labor unions to court and win. What? These labor unions are told, you're a monopoly on labor. Can you imagine the frustration? You can't stop interstate commerce with your strike. Does this solve the problem that the industrialists have? Basically, yes. Does it solve any problems that the workers have? No, it simply makes it worse. They get so frustrated, I can only imagine. We're going to see this frustration boil over in this iconic moment called the Haymarket Affair. In the middle of Chicago, at this point, the second most populated city in America, there's going to be an expansive strike. Thousands upon thousands of workers saying, I'm not going to abide by the court's ruling. We're going on strike anyway. Now we have gone kind of backwards, where we have these industrials saying, no, the law says you're going to work. If you're one of these workers, one of the laborers, what are you going to say? Say, make me. Are there ways for the industrials to make them go back to work? Violence. Do they hire the strike breakers and say, all right, go beat them up and we'll go back to work? There has to be a way to stop this. If you're one of these laborers and you see these gigantic men with baseball bats coming at you saying, go back to work, who should you call? Thank you. I always get someone says Ghostbusters. Call the police. Here come the police. They show up really right before these strike breakers start throwing punches at baseball bats. When a bomb goes off. We have a dozen police officers dead, but we're not sure. Even to this day, we don't know who threw the bomb into the crowd. But who looks responsible? If it wasn't for these people on strike, we wouldn't have been in this situation. We have this bomb that explodes, and no one knows who's responsible, but we have a dozen police officers dead and even more people injured. We are looking at this saying, these laborers are becoming more and more radicalized. The American public looks at this situation and says, something's gone horribly wrong. We have a bomb exploding in the middle of the second most populated city in all of America. Something has to change. When the American public turns against these labor unions, who do you think is right behind them? The federal government says, you're right. Something has gone horribly wrong. We need to solve the problem, and the problem is these labor unions. So let me ask again. Does the federal government have a lot of power over these industrialists? No. Do their workers have a lot of power over these industrialists? Not really. In the late 1800s, going into the early 1900s, these industrialists still wield a lot of power. But it's going to start to slowly be chipped away.